Hi everyone and welcome to Hit the Apex. This week we're coming to you a little bit later, apologies for that, but it's just been a bit of a whirlwind week, but we're here regardless to wrap up the Austrian Grand Prix for you from last week. It's hard to believe that it's already been run and done, and then the British Grand Prix, we'll preview that for you as well and talk about all the other news making the headlines this week. So Baden, thanks for joining me as always. I'm Jawad and let's get straight into it because, yeah, you know, Austrian Grand Prix was already 7 days ago and here we are wrapping it up for you finally, and it was one for Red Bull to remember, with Max Verstappen taking the win at the Red Bull Ring.
Whoa, where do we start? It feels like we've just been in this vortex of action, and leg 3 out of 3 come 24 hours time. I think collectively, not just our end, but more significantly all those teams, they'll be enjoying what is, I guess, based on the last few weeks, a rare weekend off. So it'll be nice to get through this evening at Britain, but more on that later. And I guess it does feel like a long time ago, oddly enough, for Austria, and quite a race that was. And we thought early on it was going to be one of those typical Mercedes dominant afternoons, but that wasn't to be the case, and we saw really Max Verstappen probably amend all the mishaps he had in the early part of his season.
Yeah, well, he's had a good run of late, you could say, with the podiums that he had in the lead up to this race, and finally getting that win under his belt for the first for 2018 as well, and for Red Bull as well to win their first race at their home circuit too. It's something that would have set the fans over excitement, I guess. So talk about the race itself. So there was mayhem across the 71 laps. Both Mercedes retired from the race ultimately, and mechanical failures, you know, first time since I think 1955 since both Mercedes running in a Grand Prix have had retirements due to mechanical failures. So it's a pretty significant moment there. And for the championship too, you know, Hamilton 0 points, Bottas 0 points, and as a result, Sebastian Vettel takes the lead of the championship as well, coming out of that race again. You know, this sort of tic-tac-toe, whatever, seesaw we see in the standings at the moment. And also to point out too, it's their first retirement, Mercedes, since 2016 when Hamilton and Rosberg came together.
Yeah, I think that it might be an indication for Mercedes how relentless they are now, being forced to push. Not that in 2017 that they really had an easy run, you could say, but this year really is seeing that Ferrari, more so at those traditional circuits where Mercedes has been used to success, that they're having to fight that much deeper. And on this occasion, we really thought that they were streets ahead. All the indications were there after those opening few laps, but clearly the strain is on, and it gets to them, and it manifests not just in that reliability stakes, but maybe strategically as well, with that blunder now, and much humility from the chief strategist there in James Vowles, who owned up to his error. But we did see, again, certainly a flustered Lewis Hamilton in response.
Yeah, that he did, but speaking of that whole incident with the public apology, you could say, was it called for? Did it have to be done? And I guess, you know, the pressure that Lewis Hamilton puts on his team or whatever, you could say that, you know, very brave of Vowles to step up and then accept the blame, but whatnot. But I guess it adds the drama. But is it a bit too Hollywood that, you know, that he had to do that? Like, you know, other teams say, I mean, Christian Horner came out after the race and said that, you know, the team basically Hamilton threw his man under the bus, basically, and that wouldn't be seen at any other team without any repercussions. So, you know, Hamilton, I guess, you know, sometimes greater than the sum of his parts, you could say, and in this case, clearly is.
Now we know Christian Horner's the chief shit stirrer of the F1 paddock. He's always got his word each way on a particular topic, whether it concerns him or not. But Lewis Hamilton, we do know every time he's compromised, whether it's maybe a split 50-50, 60-40 driver team, and on this occasion he was quite ropeable, and he had to really bite his tongue, you could say, based on that communication. And not too long after that, Vowles owned up to his role there, and I guess the rest of it is history. But for what it is, once off, you can see that some is internally, Vowles doesn't feel as though he's going to be thrown under the bus in a job security perspective, it's just one of those things, human error. It does happen, and clearly Lewis Hamilton shows once again that as much as he has it under control when he's leading, when things don't go his way, he can lose his cool very quickly.
Well, let's talk about the incident anyway, like why it, or like how it led to that anyway. So Lewis Hamilton led from the first corner, despite Bottas being on pole, his first pole of the year, you could say too. And then the first round of pit stops came under the virtual safety car. So we had the virtual safety car out to clear up a bit of debris, and then we saw Ferrari and Red Bull call in both cars at the same time to stack and to pit, whilst Mercedes didn't call Hamilton in. So, I guess that everyone was a bit perplexed by that at the time. So, why didn't they pit him at the under the VSC? Was he in that window to do it? That was another question, and a lot of numbers were crunched to realise that, I guess it was marginal at the time, and I guess then, Val's making the call that it was his fault that he didn't see that happening. So I guess that's why Hamilton was a bit shocked to see that he was behind after he did make his first pit stop, his first of two pit stops, mind you, that he was behind the likes of Max Verstappen, Kimi Raikkonen, after that first round of pit stops.
You just see it does work in equal directions. You go back to Australia when Ferrari benefited from its own customers in Haas there, that double blunder they had with the tyre fitting failures. And then you go to Azerbaijan when Vettel was dominating early until that safety car triggered by the Red Bull friendly fire. And on that occasion, Hamilton ultimately benefited when Bottas had that late tyre failure himself. So you can see that it's just one of those things where on any given weekend, it's impossible to be 100% accurate, and you've got a really extremely small window to act there, and you've just got to back yourself, and 70% of the time it might pay off, and the other 30 you just have to live with the consequences.
Well, the same thing happened in China, didn't it, as well, where he did come in for that stop under the virtual safety car again, and I guess back then it was what definitively was found out was the fact that his track position was he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So whilst the likes of Verstappen, Ricciardo or whatever were able to come in and pit straight away because they were just outside the pit lane when the safety car came out, Hamilton was on the other side of the track and couldn't react the same way. So I guess, it's those little things that I guess are going to determine how these situations pan out, and in the end it didn't work for Hamilton. He came back out behind a Ferrari and a Red Bull, and two Red Bulls in fact, but then there was a lot of tyre troubles as well because he and Daniel Ricciardo, Lewis Hamilton that is, had high blistering on those front tyres, and they both were forced into making that second stop, and then after that both drivers unfortunately ended up having mechanical failures. So Ricciardo out of the race, Hamilton out of the race. Sebastian Vettel, one of the highlights of the race, you could say, he was put down in the field due to that grid penalty for impeding Carlos Sainz in qualifying. He actually had to overtake Hamilton on track, which was really good to see as well. Both fighting for track position, Vettel getting the elbows out, not making a hash of it like previously we would have seen. And pretty significant moment in the championship too. And I guess when you see how things panned out afterwards with Hamilton not finishing the race, Vettel coming back from the penalty, lower on the grid to finish on the podium, I guess, it was a significant race that Ferrari had won, even though they didn't actually win the race itself.
Yeah, you can claim that the tyres role in the race probably mitigated the fallout from Mercedes' strategic error there, and you can say that it was fully earned. Vettel managing that rubber so much better than Hamilton, who pitted later than all of the cars who ended up ahead of him there, and yet he was the first one to suffer that degradation. So you can see that for whatever reason Mercedes probably would have been on track to have been devoured at any rate after pit stops without failure for Bottas and then Hamilton in those closing laps. And you can see perhaps on the side of Hamilton's perspective the fact that Vettel could only manage third and there was no late switch there with Raikkonen, those 3 extra points, who knows in the later context how crucial that might be, but 15 points as opposed to 25, it wasn't the worst case scenario, and you can just see that looking through to the finish there, Max Verstappen ultimately, kudos to him, where we thought Ferrari were going to really just come and really take him and put him back into perhaps as low as third. So credit to him for holding his nerve.
Yeah, exactly. And, when you look at the way that, the championship's gone so far this season and how, I guess, last year, when you look back at last year, the results that ultimately cruelled Vettel's charge, I guess this year he's had a lot of bad luck, you could say, more so than Lewis Hamilton, even though after Austria we're led to believe that Hamilton's having the harsh end of the stick, you could say, even though he's had the one retirement to his name. Vettel's just had a lot of things go wrong for him, not of his own doing, unfortunately. So I guess when this sort of result comes and he gets the lead, or whether it's a 1 point lead or whatever, it's quite significant. And then, going into the next race with Silverstone, he's going to need a race win to solidify that position. So, but I guess also probably a star of the day too, which we'll talk about driver of the day, like I've already given it away now. Kimi Räikkönen, P2. Like, he's been under a lot of pressure, of course, about his position next year, whether he's going to stay at Ferrari, whether he goes to another team or not, and will he be in Formula One or not. So to get that second in the end was pretty good. The fact that, he was closing in on Verstappen at the end of the race, if the race was a few more laps, could he have got him? But Ferrari and I guess Verstappen to a certain degree, both really good on their tyres, light on the rubber. The Ferrari, I guess, inherently has been, apart from Barcelona, the only time that they really had tyre troubles. So far this year they've been really strong on those Pirellis.
It just shows you in tandem with that compound change up, the width there, the diameter, whatever you want to call it, Spain, France, now this weekend at Silverstone, the way that it fluctuates from how we saw Ferrari really struggling the week prior at Paul Ricard to here, as much as they mightn't have had the raw pace in qualifying in the early stages of that race, when it comes to endurance, they really are able to hang on and really get better as the race progresses. Yeah,
exactly. So solid result for Kimi there in second as well, not too far behind Verstappen in the end, and then Vettel the third too. So, but when you look at the best of the rest now, and I guess I call them the Austrian Avengers, because Haas were able to avenge that result they lost in Australia, which you touched on earlier, with Ferrari being the benefactors in that situation, because in their 50th Grand Prix they got their team best result. Both Roman Grosjean and, yes, I said it, Roman Grosjean in the points for the first time in 2018, and Kevin Magnussen too. So Grosjean fourth, which is Haas's best result since they've come into Formula One, and then Magnussen equaling that Bahrain result of fifth as well. So a solid outing for Haas. Both cars able to convert their top 10 starts to top 10 finishes, top 5 finishes, sorry.
Yeah, a long time coming, particularly for Grosjean. Magnussen's been really consistent, flying under the radar. He's just accumulated points and being fairly clean, apart from the odd skirmish here or there, gets his elbows out and qualifying and whatnot. You hear about him on the team radio, a lot of people pointing fingers, but for Grosjean, he's been front and centre for the balance of the season to date, and you can say that he's been building to this probably since Monaco. He's kept a lower profile and been unlucky not to get inside the top 10 for a few races. For this one, he got a bit of luck, that's for sure, but he was in the right place for the entire weekend there, and you can just hope this is what he needs just to get his head back in the right spot and deliver on the promise we all thought would see from both of them coming into the season.
Well, even though that the word is that likely Grosjean's going to be out at the end of this year from Haas, he's still got to get those results under his belt to, I guess, find himself a position on the grid next year. Otherwise, that may not happen for the senior Frenchman. So, milestone event for Haas, milestone event for Force India, scoring points as well with Sergio Perez and Esteban Ocon, 7th and 6th for those guys. So that was their 200th Grand Prix since they became Force India back in 2008. So it's been a long time, a lot of bridge under the water. Yet to win a race, of course, but they've had 6 podiums, I think, under their belt. And, of course, even though they're celebrating that milestone, their future still seems pretty clouded as far as, what's going on with the ownership of the team. We've got Vijay Mallya present at the British Grand Prix this weekend, the only race he is allowed to attend, of course. But, are we going to see new owners take over that team sooner or later, or are they going to suffer the same fate as Amana did when they went into administration?
Yeah, it's quite a paradox for Force India. They've started slowly this season, but really built that momentum. And that podium at Azerbaijan for Perez probably kick-started the campaign, and now they're really not without a chance of fourth in the constructors, and that belies the off-track situation where there's talk by the end of the month that they could be into receivership because of stubborn BJ Malia there and Sabaratra Roy refused to take any offers on prospective bids to buy them out, and as a result, who knows if they'll be there when we emerge on the other side of the European summer break, as much as they've been such a mainstay in the top half of the points for the past 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, that is going to be a great shame because of the stubbornness of certain individuals that a great team like Force India would have to collapse in that sort of fashion. So we hope that's not the case, and we'll see, what happens over the coming weeks as well, because the mid-season break is, as you say, around the corner. So. But I guess it was a good day all round for everyone in the points, because we had both Saubers also in the points for the first time, I think, since 2015, that both Sauber cars have done that. So we had Charles Leclerc again, P8 or whatever.
P9.
Sorry, P9.
You can't forget about Fernando Alonso back in the points there, P8.
Yeah, it's Fernando Alonso from pit lane to P8. I guess a casual drive he had. Great battle, I guess, he had with the Saubers at the end. So P9 for Ericsson and P10. Sorry for Leclerc, not P8. But Charles Leclerc's points run continues through. So he's just continued to impress by the day, and I guess. He always seems to get involved with Alonso for some reason, which I guess will be training him pretty well.
And you can see for Sauber there was a bit of camaraderie there. The fact that Leclerc let Ericsson through in the dying laps there to have a run at Alonso, and he came close, but ultimately he stayed true to his word there and pulled aside there. So Leclerc got that ninth back at the line, and for Ericsson, just a good confidence boost for him to see that. As much as Leclerc's been the talk of the town, they've got a legitimate two-car team there, and it's quite staggering how rapidly by the race they seem to be growing in confidence to a point where you never know, they could be at the stage where maybe a Force India or dare we say McLaren, Renault are, where they've got both cars in the points more often than not.
Yeah, well, that's, I guess the gradual rise of Sauber, and that's why I think I said a couple of weeks ago, if next year is not going to be the year for Leclerc to move to Ferrari, perhaps staying at Sauber might not be a bad idea, given the fact that this team is really developing really fast and could become those regular points scorers like they were in a 2012, for example, when they were on the podium as well on a semi-regular basis. So that would be a sight to see, Sauber back on the podium.
Yeah, I think it's just good for anyone, really, and you can see that as far as that renewed collaboration with Ferrari, it's really making its impact now. They've had to be patient, but down the grid, they've probably taken the place of these other teams like the McLaren and Williams, who are just sinking further into the abyss, and they're the next ones who are going to have to get their houses in order.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess overall, coming out of Austria, Vettel leads the championship by 1 point, heading to Silverstone, which we'll touch on now a bit later. Of course, drivers of the day, I sort of already dropped the hint that Kimi Räikkönen was the pick for me, even though he didn't really gain any positions off the line, as he hasn't done all season long, to hang in there.
He had about 3 bites at the cherry, though, and clearly got
a
bit ambitious, but credit to him not for being timid as he might have been in the past.
Exactly, but solid result for him, and the fact that the race win could have been there. He's got that mind frame too. When you hear him talk, that he's disappointed, even though he's in second. The fact that he could have had the win on hand, so it just goes to show you still got that hunger.
Yeah, I think it's growing more evident, as much as it's in line with that speculation about Leclerc joining Ferrari as soon as 2019, that he's as competitive as ever, and you wouldn't begrudge Raikkonen if he was given another season. As much as Leclerc probably is ready, the way he's going, his rate of progression, he's not going to be out of his depth regardless. But I think for the Finn, this little running joke about if you'll ever get another victory, you can really feel that it's only a matter of now, not if but when, as long as he can show that he's legitimately in that kind of form, and Ferrari doesn't go and sabotage him for the betterment of Vettel, then he fully deserves some sort of success.
Yeah, so Kimmy, your pick as well then, or did you have anyone else in
I
mind?
think Kimmy just nudging Grosjean all around. Not the fact that he was mind-blowingly quick, but just for the fact that been such a long time coming for him to be up there, and hopefully it just means that he can put the woes of the first third of the season to rest.
Yeah, exactly. So we hope that we see more from Grosjean as with Raikkonen. So let's quickly go over the digest then as well, because we got still plenty more to discuss. And I guess the big news coming into the British Grand Prix weekend is that there's going to be changes, or there has been changes at McLaren, with Eric Boullier announcing that he will be resigning effective immediately. So he's not actually present in at Silverstone with McLaren. We've got Gilda Ferran, who I guess in partnership with IndyCar and whatnot now at McLaren as an advisor this year, has stepped up into like a more senior role, and Andrea Stella as well, who followed Fernando Alonso over from Ferrari in 2015, has got that trackside role that I guess Boullier did in effect have before. So, you know, the heads are starting to roll, of course, but is that mean there going to be any changes? You talked about it in an article, that this matrix structure that they've got there at McLaren, could that be perhaps hurting them? I mean, like, you know, the results this year haven't shown progress, even though they've switched from Honda to Renault. They've gone backwards, you could say, in this middle part of the season. So what's got to give? You know, will the change in leadership actually make some kind of an impact?
It gets to a point where you question whether it's just for the sake of saying there's a scalp there and then they move on. They clearly need to be the right appointments, and that talk of so many people being accountable across the board to so many different departments, and the fact that there's no real transparency and who might have certain responsibilities, so they all just drift along in mediocrity, and you hope that these guys here, clearly they're very talented and they have the right pedigree, but as long as, again, the responsibility won't be too much for them to handle, and then they'll have too much to deal with, you do have to wonder that, again, it's going to be something where this season, 2019, 2020, is probably going to have to be sacrificed just to get the right structure in place, the right mindset. There's no point rushing the process here, because then they're just going to be in the long term continuing to drift, as we see with Williams, how they've gone back to where they were before they started the Mercedes partnership, and that's another story. But for McLaren, that talk as well about how this might put the brakes on the IndyCar program. Perhaps this will allow them to divert full attention and resource back towards making Formula One work.
Yeah, the only time I said that, you know, it'd be great to see them go off to do IndyCars and also endurance racing was if it didn't come at the cost of their F1 program, which now clearly them saying that we're going to put that on the hold for now means that, yeah, you know, they've got to focus all that resource and attention over to the F1 side of things, which is their core business. So they've got to fix that first before they can go racing anywhere else. And it's just a shame when you see that after, you know, making the decision to ditch Honda, go to Renault, that even still it hasn't yielded the result. Like, not saying that they're going to be winning every race, but like just get themselves regularly scoring points, qualifying in the top 10 or just on the fringes of the top 10. I mean, you know, Van Dorn got eliminated in Q1, I think, in Austria again. So, and this time as well in Silverstone. So it's just, yeah, you know, the buck's got to stop with someone, I guess. And now that, you know, Zach Brown perhaps has got more of a responsibility over the team, so, you know, it's all on him now to make sure things work.
He's probably got a bit of time. For him, he's in an unenviable situation, and he's got to oversee the whole lot, not just the racing department and what McLaren wants to stand for. So you hope that this is a bit of a defining moment for them. And then Eric Boullier, as much as he's the one to fall on his sword there, you have to question whether he was the one who really bore the responsibilities for where McLaren was at. So they have to collectively make sure that they know their place. And again, it's very complicated. I think it's hard for outsiders to really pinpoint where the issues are, but they've just been drifting for many years, really, since I guess you could say the call was made to to go to Honda and the whole design mindset when Martin Whitmarsh went down another road after 2012, and then the coup between he and Ron Dennis. It's just been one debacle after another.
Yeah, exactly. So a bit of stability would be nice for that team, but more on McLaren another time, I'm sure. We had the date for the Australian Grand Prix next year announced as well this week, with an early date, which is, I guess, to our benefit, of course, being in mid-March as opposed to the right at the end of March. So it's 14th to the 17th next year, I guess. And I guess the reasons for that earlier date, perhaps to avoid that clash with round one of the AFL, even though I guess they both sort of work in tandem with each other. But, you know, F1 being on its standalone weekend, perhaps with better weather as well earlier in the month. And, you know, perhaps this could mean that we have a longer season as well next year with some new races being added to the calendar.
Yeah, that talk will extend into early December up to 23 events if we get that Miami prospective event, and then there's talk of Denmark and Zandvoort and Vietnam, just to mention a few. That would clearly be meaning they're going to have their hands full, but I think for Australia that talk that it'll give a fortnight's break to that Bahrain, China back-to-back little double header afterwards, and of course that notion that the third event of the season most likely to be at China, can't forget, will be the
1000th
Grand Prix, and that's going to be quite hyped up. I probably want to give it the space to be acknowledged in its own right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's hard to believe we're getting to that milestone there, 1000 Grand Prix coming up for the third race of next season. If, of course, it is the third Grand Prix of the season. We haven't seen the calendar yet for 2019, but we assume that it will be. Big news actually came out of Supercars land on Thursday, so Friday. Craig Lowndes is announcing his retirement from full-time driving, and this caught everyone off guard. A big shock considering he still has a year left on his contract with Triple Eight for next year to be racing full-time, but he wants to step back to a co-driver's role for 2019 and beyond. He wants to do media work. And I guess we'll talk about him a bit later, but yeah, it was shocking news to see. Like, he's had a bit of a renaissance in form this year. He won a race which he didn't do last year. Of course, he's been on the podium. He's sitting fourth in the championship, and just when you think that the relationship with a new engineer is starting to work, you know, he goes and drops this bombshell.
You do have to wonder how much of this decision was his own and not the instigation of Roland Dane, and whether he's got maybe plans to either get a younger face in, maybe he's got a marketing angle, but perhaps he's maybe looking at a Di Silvestro there's mention of, or whether he wants to scale back to two cars and be a bit more frugal. There's many questions out there, but for Lowndes it was interesting seeing him in his press conference there. He clearly did look beyond being obviously emotional, whether it was a bit of regret that maybe wasn't entirely his call.
Yeah, well, you know, I guess if it was, you could say perhaps if it wasn't his call, you could say he could ditch the whole loyalty thing and find another team to race with next year if it meant being full-time on the grid. But perhaps there's an element of the fact that, yeah, he feels that it's time for him to step back from full-time driving and just focus on those endurance drives and perhaps racing in other categories. So we'll talk a bit about Lowndes anyway a bit later. Wrapping up the digest, Assen Grand Prix last week with MotoGP, an absolute thriller of a race, 100+ overtakes, the top six battling with each other for the entire race. It almost seemed like it was a Moto3 race, and in the end it was Marc Marquez who triumphed. Alex Rins ended up coming second on the Suzuki. He was way back and ended up finding himself on the podium, and then Maverick Vinales as well, breaking that drought of podiums for Yamaha to finish third. So it was a thrilling race, really exciting to watch leading into the Austrian Grand Prix.
Yeah, and I guess all the other excitement, you had Lorenzo from 9th to 1st after 4 corners, and then Rossi giving him a little gentle nudge, you could say.
Almost took the whole rear off.
So clearly that was a close call, and both of them ending up further down the pack. So you can see Lorenzo's got that newfound confidence after multiple victories. But as far as leaving it all out there, they certainly they're made of something different, and almost on a race by race basis now. Just leave those fans with their mouths just wide at some of the theatrics they pull off, and you wonder how they don't have more collisions, to be honest. They're just very skilled, and they give each other the right amount of space, and just full respect to them for the show. Anyone who does attend a live race there, they're getting full value for money.
Yeah, I guess both races over the weekend in MotoGP and in the F1, the Grand Prix in Austria, both were really, really exciting races. So, we were really treated last time out. So hopefully the British Grand Prix this weekend can provide that as well. And I guess, the third race in as many weeks, the triple header concluding finally. And as you said at the top, that the teams and drivers are all going to be pretty tired as well coming out of this. And there was talk too during the week that it's from Liberty Media that it seems unlikely next year we're going to have that triple header again. I guess it was only there this year because of a World Cup clash or whatever. So the fact that next year we'll be back to just having back-to-back weekends as opposed to 3 weekends on the bounce, it's going to make everyone rest a bit easier.
Yeah, you can see logistically they're in a tight spot, and there's a lot of criticism actually coming Liberty's way between that scheduling and the actual weekend schedule, the way that it might overlap with particular World Cup fixtures, mainly England there, when they have these kickoffs such as yesterday for British Grand Prix qualifying, the first 5 minutes or so with that red flag as well, delaying proceedings further, and how that cannibalised the audience. You can say that there's only so much you can do. You can't pause the season when there's 21 races for a month or so, and clearly this has got the concrete schedule, that June-July block, the way it transitions all through Europe before that break, so they've got the time to have that 4-week real, you could say, quite necessary break for them to have 4 weeks just so they can cool their heels, and next year there'll be a much more workable calendar.
Well, that's the way that's being criticised, Liberty being criticised, is unfair. Like, any punter who watches any sport can come out and says, oh, well, that clashes with something else I'm watching, so clearly they've done it all wrong. It's like, as important as the World Cup is and everything, like, who knew that England would have even made it to this stage anyway? So it's not like, oh, you could have foresaw that. So yeah, the criticism just seems a bit uncalled for, you could say. It's like, let's say, for example, we had the Japanese Grand Prix somehow clash with the AFL Grand Final. Oh, there goes your Australia. They've got to reschedule that to suit the Australian audience.
Well, as it is, we already have that dilemma when it comes to Japan.
Yeah, so there you go. 2 big races clashing with each other, the Japanese Grand Prix and the Bathurst 1000. You don't hear us criticising Liberty Media for that sort of scheduling. So again, the British seem a bit parochial. You could seem parochial, it seems, with everything, that benefits. It's all got to benefit them, basically. So yeah, it's just a bit of typical POM whinging, I'd say, in regards to that.
Call it that centric. You'd say more Eurocentric. It seems like they get a pretty good deal the way they have all their.
Oh yeah, try watching.
We're now up at not just 10 or 11 for us in Australia.
10 past 11.
We're talking 10 past 1.
Yeah, exactly. So 10 past 11 seems pretty tame compared to 10 past 1 for our Kiwi brothers. But yeah, it just seems a bit, a bit uncalled for, that criticism anyway. But let's get back to the British Grand Prix. So can anyone stop the Mercedes Lewis Hamilton juggernaut? Of course. So Mercedes have won their 5 years on the bounce, with Nico Rosberg's win in 2013, and then Lewis Hamilton has had 4 from 4 over the last 4 years. So, and he's on pole position too by the faintest of margins over the Ferraris. I mean, you were saying that pole was for Ferrari, basically, but that extra 100th of a second that Hamilton had over Sebastian Vettel was just pretty ridiculous.
You have to wonder how much of that was down to Vettel's neck issue there from third practice. He did well just to make it out there for quali, and clearly with the G-forces you experience, imagine through Cops, Maggots and Beckett's what the load would be. So clearly that could have been where Hamilton, you could see, made up that time, and perhaps Vettel just couldn't withstand the threshold there. And I think he did a good job in the circumstances to be within half a tenth of a second, and clearly Kimi Räikkönen himself was really on it, and again just lacking that all round lap performance is the only thing which probably denied him from what would have been an amazing pole.
Well, he did say that he locked the brakes, I think, going into the penultimate corner, so that ultimately might have cost him that little hundredth or whatever that he was behind Hamilton. But you were saying those corners before. This year, it seems they're taking a lot more of those corners flat out, and of course that addition of the third DRS zone too. So it's making for a pretty quick lap, you could say, and a lot more full throttle. We've seen some track modifications too, with some sausage curbs installed to stop drivers abusing track limits. And in Austria, I guess the circumstance, like the consequences, are a lot more punishing than they've been this weekend in Silverstone. So
look at turn one, I forget the corner, but certainly the Wellington straight as well. It's been a very much high attrition for the likes of Grosjean, for Hartley, for both Williams. They're coming croppers in qualifying, and all of them the rear loads on the tyres or suspension, as we saw in the case of Hartley. It's very demanding technically.
Yeah, that crash for Brendan Hartley, almost reminiscent of Sebastian Buemi's little incident in China with the suspension just failing. And I guess it wasn't as spectacular as Buemi, but yeah, it was pretty scary for Hartley, who seems to not be able to get a trick so far this season. So this, of course, is the last race too, where Pirelli have those lower tread depths on their tyres for the race. It's the first time we've seen the hard compound tyre as well in action for 2018. And all the talk is that, yeah, we can expect a two-stop strategy given the abrasive nature of the track, given how bumpy it is. So with, I guess, multiple stops forecast, I guess this should be pretty interesting to see how people will fare. And given what happened to Mercedes last week in Austria, is there going to be pressure on them to make the right call this time?
Yeah, and you think in line with the way that those previous two events within this little three-race, you could call it mini phase with the unique rubber settings there, that Ferrari looked that much closer this time around, just managing the tyres. So over a few stops, they'll be well poised, I think, especially if Vettel can get a good start off the line and Raikkonen can at least hold position. They can be very confident, I'd say. And Mercedes, they're really going to have to work very hard for this one, but it's very, again, difficult to go past Lewis Hamilton at his home track. He just seems to pull something out of the hat, as he did in qualifying. You could see he was quite emotional afterwards, so it's one of those things where he really has to be top of his game. And I think you're just seeing it's a sign again for Mercedes, unlike previous campaigns where they were in pilot mode and still doing it at a canter. They're now really having to fight for every victory.
Yeah, so testament to Lewis Hamilton being emotional after the race. So, given that the track conditions are going to be very hot and Ferrari can manage their rubber a lot better, I wouldn't rule them out of this race either. And as you were saying, a matter of when, basically, for Kimi Raikkonen, could he potentially look at winning his first race of the season at Silverstone as well. Ferrari last won here, of course, in 2011 with Fernando Alonso, whilst Sebastian Vettel has not won here since 2009, one of his early wins there in the Red Bull. So he doesn't really seem to do too well around Silverstone, but, I guess he can change that trend like he's done with a couple of races this season.
Yeah, you see just the way Ferrari has a lot more confidence, and in those moments where things go wrong, they tend to be the ones who lose out more so, rather than perhaps minimising the damage, you could say. So probably Austria was the first time where they emerged from a situation where they were on the back foot and came away with a swing in their favour, certainly for Vettel, if not in the constructors, where they reassumed that points lead. So you could say that playing those percentages again, it's what it's going to come down to. So it's always weighing up within the race weekend versus the overall context of the championship.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess talking about Valtteri Bottas again, and when is his luck going to finally change? Because Austria, he had pole position, he lost the lead at the first corner to his teammate, and then to be cruelled by another retirement, I guess, he's the only guy in the top six to not have a win to his name now that Verstappen won in Austria. So where does his luck change?
Yeah, it's hard to think. You honestly could say Bottas probably could have had 2 victories this season at least, which would have put him within maybe 10 points of the lead 2 guys, and then the points they would have not had if Bottas had taken victories. He'd be arguably in a 3-way fight, and now he finds himself down in sixth, and you'd think on the surface of it that he's really languishing, but it's almost a case can be made. He's been, after his little blip at Australia, he's been the most consistent driver when he's been on track.
Yeah, when he's been on track, that is. So hopefully his luck can change this weekend. He starts from fourth, of course, in the race. So, it's just sad when you see a driver who's as good as Bottas not get those results. And I guess Mercedes leaning towards retaining both drivers for next year, Hamilton and Bottas, to continue that partnership.
I think Mercedes would more than lean towards keeping Hamilton. As far as Bottas goes, he certainly deserves it.
No, after criticising the engineer, that's it. They're going to cut the tyres. So, yeah, that's it for Lewis. Sorry, but it's a home race for the large percentage of teams as well. So, large percentage of the teams, it's their home race. So there's going to be expectations on them to deliver in front of their home audience, of course. McLaren, Williams languishing at the back. Force India, they've got their boss here this weekend. So you'd be hoping for some good results for those guys. But yeah, it should be a good race overall, you'd hope.
Yeah, and just the way that this weather has been sensational brings back memories of my own pilgrimage there in 2010, and probably a bit of a chastening experience going from the depths of winter here into what was a heat wave for the UK. 31, 32 degrees is like them being on the sun, you could say, and certainly felt the effects of that for a week or so afterwards. But the whole weekend, when the sun is there, everyone's having a blast, and that'll probably have an impact with the temperature we did see in qualifying, 52 degrees track surface. That definitely had a role to play. I think the way that the tyre compounds ended up being affected as the session progressed. Yeah,
sunny Silverstone as it is, and I guess the British weather has actually come to the fore for once this time, so it's really good to see that. So that's it for Silverstone, I guess. We'll do our sporting moments of the week, but I guess this week we're dedicating this little section to Craig Lowndes and his illustrious career in Aussie motorsport. Now, given the fact that I guess he's retiring from full-time driving, but he'll still be driving as an endurance driver, we're still going to see him and everything, but I guess it gives us time to reflect on the career that he has had, which has spanned, you could say, I like to think 2 generations worth it's spanned, because, of course, he was there in the 90s where he was the kid and everything, and then
he was like the dedicated. You'd say he was the chosen successor to Peter Brock, and now you see like the handover he's got to Scott McLaughlin.
Yeah, exactly. So the fact that he was there as the kid in the 90s or whatever, and then through the 2000s, so more than 2 decades worth of racing under his belt, the success that he's had, 6 Bathurst 1000 victories, 3 Supercars championships as well, over a century of race wins. He and Jamie Whincup, of course, are the only drivers to have achieved over 100 wins in the category. So, at the age of 44, he's still going. It's just, what an incredible driver.
And you do think it's one of those moments where you get the unique individuals that you can't imagine a sport being without, whether it's in football or cricket or motorsport, whichever discipline it is. So it's just a hard one to get your head around when you do think how different the paddock will be next season when he's not that permanent presence. But I guess he won't be lost, as we mentioned there earlier. He'll be there in the Supercars broadcasting fraternity and then the Enduro Cup. So it's not like he's going off on some Australian-wide tour never to be heard of again, as some maybe sporting greats like Tony Lockett say they like the life of obscurity. So he's going to be still there in plentiful supply. But as far as looking back on what he's done in that full-time presence, it's just he's involved in so many of those moments that go down in Supercars history.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess on a personal level, you'd probably agree with me and say that seeing him win Bathurst in 2015 was certainly a highlight of watching him throughout his career, with Stephen Richards winning that race. It was an eventful race as it was, but creating a bit of magic around the mountain. They always associate Lowndes with Bathurst as well, and I guess this year he has a shot of winning his 7th, of course, and he's only 3 wins away from equaling Peter Brock's record as well. And you talk about that relationship that he had with Brock and the likeliness between the two, the people's champion, of course, man of the people. So, It's a bit sad that we see a driver like Lowndes hang up the helmet full time, but of course he still has plenty of shots at Bathurst to see if he can equal his great friend and mentor's record.
And it'd be nice to see him at least bow out on a note where he's still quite competitive with regular fighting for podiums and race victories, rather than being in the sad position. Maybe you look at Formula One with a Jenson Button or a Fernando Alonso, where they're just really pale imitations of their former selves, more so because of machinery, and they just retire, or I guess for jumping the gun on Alonso, but sooner than later, just very jaded with the process. And Lowndes will probably at least maybe get another couple of victories in his own right before he hangs up the caper.
Yeah, perhaps Bathurst this year could be one to look out for if he could win that one alongside Richo as well. Again, whether the championship is there for the taking or not, you'd probably say realistically it's not this year, but winning those key races I think are going to be crucial, whether it's a Sandown, Bathurst or Newcastle, something like that. So yeah, it's great to look back at those memories, of course, and he'll be doing more GT racing, of course. He said that Le Mans is an ambition of his as well, which would be great to see. He already does the Bathurst 12-hour on a regular basis, and of course I got the privilege to see him win one of those as well last year with Jamie Whincup, Tony Verlander for the Ferrari team. So it's always great to see Craig Lowndes behind the wheel of a car, and if you haven't seen him, do yourself a favour and go to one of the remaining supercars races this year and see him, just whether it's for a victory or whatever. Just you've got to see him steer that thing in the flesh to see what it's all about.
Yeah, just everything about him, just the personality and charisma. He's got everything you could want marketability wise. They don't grow on trees, and you can see that it's probably going to be a Scott McLaughlin, you would think, that just has that all-round package, and now he's coming into his own right as a driver, where they're just clearly there's something that raises them above the rest of the competition.
Well, approachability-wise as well, Lowndes is probably one of the best drivers to go up to for an autograph and to get a photo. He has so much time for the fans, as did Brock as well, from what we are led to believe. So it's he's the complete package, the people's champion, as I like to say.
Describe him with, than some of the events that you reminisce on when you think back to maybe the earlier days, about some of those moments when he made that transition to Ford, and how he thought that was maybe a new leaf, and how many near misses he did have. The credit has to be given to him there for taking that leap out of the sanctuary of HRT, where he had his all of his 3 titles, and he got so close on probably 4 or 5 occasions with Ford, and then again a few near misses when they transitioned Triple Eight to Holden in the 2010 onwards, but it wasn't quite meant to be. But it certainly doesn't mean that he lost any of the edge that he had in the first part of his career.
Yeah, no, not at all. So I guess on that note, we'll wrap things up. It'll be a pleasure to watch all the remaining races this year in the championship, and hopefully he can win a few more. So yeah, as far as supercars and F1 is concerned, we've got a busy few hours ahead before the British Grand Prix. So thanks for joining us, and we'll be back at our regular Thursday time next week anyway. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week.
And a quick shout out finally to Dion on the running front. He cracked the sub 225 egg last weekend at Gold Coast. That was a big one to get off the box, suffering now with a bit of a blister, but it was all worthwhile and much satisfaction, so well done there.
Yeah, cool. Good result with the Gold Coast thing there, so thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next week.